Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our PFAS webinar in collaboration with our supplier SCAT, based in Germany. Welcome, Florian, and we appreciate your time and interest in this important topic. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them via the Q&A section. We will be answering all questions at the end. So if you let any questions, please let us know afterwards. Florian, over to you.
Okay. So hello, everybody. My name is Florian Koehler. I'm from SCAT. SCAT is a company based in Germany. I hope you see my screen. So let's start the presentation. Today's topic, we are talking about PFAS. We call it the eternity chemical, the forever product. So what this is all about. So first of all, who is SCAT? We are, as I said, a German company based close to the Frankfurt airport. 25 years ago, we invented the safety cap. If you look at my handsome feature, the first safety caps and safety waste caps for the HPLC to make sure that there is no solvent contamination within the lab. Today, we are talking about PFAS. So as I said, we're talking about lab safety normally when it comes to solvent contamination. And now we are talking about safety when it comes to PFAS contamination. So you all know that PFAS there are so many different types of PFAS products in the market. Actually, if you look at numbers in the internet, something between 10,000 and 50,000 different chemicals which are under this PFAS umbrella. These are hydrocarbons in which the hydrogen atom has been partially replaced with fluorine atoms, just for those who want to know. PFAS you see everywhere on the planet. You have a frying pan anti-stick, potentially PFAS containing. You have fluids or gases which can PFAS containing. For example, fire extinguisher, the foam can contain or very likely contains PFAS. Which leads me to the next slide. So that you see, PFAS is everywhere in everyone's life. Because it has very, very good characteristics. Is water and grease repellent, heat resistance. It's actually a wonder product when it was invented, and it still is. So it's still a product where it's essential in the environment. For example, heart surgery. Some of the instruments used there, they are coated with a PFAS material, and there are no alternatives. So it's an important product, but it also shows some risks. Number one, as I said earlier, it's a forever product. So that means once out there in the environment, it doesn't disintegrate. It stays there. It stays there for now and for in 50 years, 100 years from now. So it's a generation problem. So as such, not a problem, but it's also a health risk. There's so many different illnesses coming from the exposure to PFAS, for example, cancer, and there are the risk of reproduction organs. The sperm count of men is reduced due to PFAS. So the list is long and the list is sad. So we just need to be aware that PFAS, on one hand, is an essential product in a lot of industries. On the other hand, it creates a lot of environmental problems. This is a picture of Europe. And in the center of Europe here, where you see my mouse, this is Germany. And I'm just sitting there, right there, where my mouse is. And every red dot is actually a contamination of groundwater. So you can see that entire Germany is physically contaminated. If you see here this red line, this is the Danube River coming from Central Europe and going eventually into the Black Sea. The entire Danube River is contaminated. So why are Romania or not contaminated? I'm sure they are contaminated, but there are no proper data available for Romania when it comes to contamination. So yeah, but who is interested in Europe? Let's see what's the world situation. So yes, again here, Europe, you see we are really covered in PFAS. And you see the Americas, and you see Asia. The problem is white areas doesn't mean that there is no contamination. It means there are no data available. But you see here, your area, South Africa, we talk about contamination. So I took a bit of effort to see what's the situation in South Africa. Is it really serious? And it is actually serious. There is an evidence of contamination, and I just read what what you can read. But PFAS have been detected in rivers and wastewaters, even drinking waters in South Africa. For those who are dialing in from Johannesburg, I wouldn't eat a fish caught in the Vaal River. The wastewater plants are not properly set up to remove PFAS. That's mind-blowing. So number one, we have contamination. Number two is there is no proper decontamination processes in place. And yes, so we are not talking about a theory that there may some contamination. There are contamination. It's not the entire South Africa. There are Cape Town region, Johannesburg region, and of course a highly industrious area, because the industry is the origin of the PFAS contamination. The difference is between, let's say, Europe. I don't say Germany. I don't want to sound like we are the best, but let's say Europe and the EU has certain regulations in place to address that, and you will see later in this slide why it started. So there's a regulatory gap between Europe and South Africa. And as I said, the water treatments are not set up like that. So the South African government is not there yet when it comes to PFAS regulation. They're about 20 years behind. So the situation we see in South Africa was about 20, 25 years here in Europe and Germany. You will see this slide again a few slides after, because this is basically where does it come from, not only in South Africa, but virtually everywhere. PFAS contamination starts in industry. So, for example, if you look at our waste cap, safety cap here, and you look again at my picture, you see the white core in between. This is PTFE. PTFE we use because it doesn't react with the solvent in the bottle. So those safety caps here have virtually an unlimited lifetime. But PTFE contains PFAS. So we say, oh, the cap here is dangerous. No. PTFE in its final form and shape is not dangerous. But during production, we have PFAS contamination. So the industry, the production process is where a lot of those contamination comes from. Data situation, we saw the maps from all the globe, and you saw Africa, and you saw even the map in South Africa. And there's a lot of white areas. Does it mean, oh, there is no problems? Nope. The data situation is limited. Here in Europe, if you look at one of my earlier slides, there are organizations. Here's, for example, one organization which is an organization of broadcasting, news broadcasting and newspaper organizations who come together as an organization tracing PFAS in entire Europe to create maps and shows it to the citizens because they see it as an important task to educate people as well as the government because it's a serious issue. So this is a summary for South Africa. So there is a PFAS contamination. And at the end of my presentation, I will come to my conclusion here. My conclusion, what does it mean? So there is PFAS contamination in South Africa. And it's likely underestimated due to the gap I mentioned earlier, the data gap. And so it's in the government responsibility to close this data gap so that everybody is really aware of the real situation in South Africa. You are a food exporting country. That means the food and the wine, the perfect, wonderful wine you are exporting, part of this product is water. And you don't want to contaminate your one of the main sources of income. So now we are back to my main presentation, which is not specific to South Africa. But as I said earlier, the trigger is always the industry and the fire extinguishers and the distributors. Sewage treatment is the distributor since they're not capturing it and taking it out of the water. Landfills and of course, everyday products. We talk about different type of PFAS, a short chain and long chain. The long chains are the ones which create the problem. For those who are in chemistry or pharma experts, you know what I'm talking about. I'm actually not really knowing what I'm talking about. I'm a sales guy. So the long chain is actually the part where the body, the kidneys, the liver, they cannot absorb that and they cannot get rid of it. So this actually stays in the body and creates a problem. The short chain is not the problem. The problem in here is, as I said, there are up to 13, 14, 15,000 different types of PFAS, and there is no one PFAS test for all of them. So, what are you looking at? So even though, yep, there is PFAS, am I now exposed to a short chain or a long chain? Do I know? I'm not really knowing. So for me, PFAS as such is a risk factor. Sorry for my poor English. So what says here is there's a risk, and it's a long time risk. And this is a risk for us and for the generations to come, because as a forever product, it stays with us. You remember the red map of Europe with all the red dots? This doesn't go away. The next generation will sit and drink and eat in the same area with the same contamination, and hopefully not worse than it is today. Now, remember I said South Africa is maybe 25 years behind. Let me tell you a little story. A German broadcaster did actually a series just about PFAS, just not like 15 minutes, like 45 minutes over several days. And this was a story, and the core of the story was that there in early 2000 was a paper manufacturer in the southern part of Germany who had tons of paper he didn't need anymore. So he went to a company to dispose of it. So, can you take it and dispose of it? And they said, yeah, we can take it and dispose of it. And as this disposal company said, we are smart. Paper can be a fertilizer. Let's make fertilizer out of it and sell it to the farmers around the southern part of Germany. What they didn't know, and because at that time awareness and actually testing processes and regulations, they didn't know all this paper was treated with PFAS. With the outcome that a big part of Bavaria, or southern part of Germany, the farmland is contaminated with PFAS. And not only now, it's virtually forever. Some of the area cannot be used for farming anymore. It's really a very, very, very sad story. So, which then led a few years later to a ban of certain PFAS so the PFAS. And then it took another 2 years before they actually set up a limit in food. Before that, there was no how much PFAS in water and food is actually dangerous. Where do we set the limit? There was no. So even though you may have the idea to measure the PFAS contamination, you have even no idea whether is this actually dangerous for me or not. This took another 8 years from the original contamination, and then another 20 years before they set limiting values for drinking water. That's how slow the regulator goes. And even in EU, they are still in the process. Now they're even talking today. The EU is talking today and said, hey, no, that's such a terrible product. Let's ban PFAS, which leads to a loud outcry by the industry. I said simply, the car manufacturer says, if you want to stop the electric mobile cars, so the electric cars, that's the way to stop it, because PFAS are essential for the car batteries, for those big lithium batteries. The medical industry, said this. The guys who are doing heart surgeries, I said, yeah, if you want that half of our surgery or half of our patients die on the table, just take away our instruments, which are PFAS treated. So you cannot just, and this is what they found out, and I talked to people in China, the governmental, they're struggling right now to find the proper regulations. Having said that, it's on the top of the list. The manufacturer of HPLC is Shimatsu. They have a person inside the company who is in charge of the environment and PFAS in specific, and talking to the government about that. So it's a real issue, and people just trying at that moment, at that time, to get the head wrapped around it. And part of this presentation, this webinar, is to build awareness. I'm not, we have no money in it. Having said that, we may have. So, because are there alternatives to PFAS? So basically, the message is, as a normal consumer, or as a private consumer or industry, if there are alternatives to PFAS, my responsibility as a consumer is to look for them and to buy them. So if you buy an anti-stick frying pan, look for the frying pan with PFAS-free, because this drives the industry to produce PFAS-free products. Having said that, so the drive has to come from the consumer, right? But at that moment on time, remember I said there is no regulation, there's no awareness, so there's no real pressure coming from the consumer and from the government to change. But nevertheless, we put money in our hands and developed a PFAS-free cap. As I said earlier, so that's a bit of how SCAT does it. As I said, we have our standard safety caps with the PTFE core, which is a brilliant cap. It does its job. But when it comes to two things, when it comes to PFAS analysis, you're not allowed to use the standard cap, because the PTFE core would contaminate the actual test. Actually, as it says here, essential for accurate PFAS analysis are strict contamination controls. So key requirements include using PFAS-free materials like HDPE, polypropylene, and PEEK. Now before we had our new cap, which I explain in the next step, we had a PP cap with polypropylene. PFAS-free, because people asking for PFAS analysis, do you have a cap? The problem with polypropylene is not resistant against chemicals like it is PTFE. That means you can throw away the cap about after 12 months or 18 months. The cap doesn't last long because polypropylene eventually disintegrate when it's exposed to solvent. So the company put money and thoughts and resource into it and developed a cap with a core made of PEEK, P-E-E-K. And PEEK has the same resistance as it has as PTFE, but it's PFAS-free. So basically, it's not only PFAS-free, it has the same quality in terms of long time resistance as our standard cap. So what does it mean? Yes, you can use this for PFAS analysis. Great. But now this cap you can use for whatever HPLC application because it's environmental friendly. Now, that doesn't mean if you have already a PTFE cap, you can keep using this because the contamination happens during the manufacturing process. PTFE, once out there, is not a problem for the environment. But if you considering buying a safety cap in the future, you may maybe go direct for a P cap, like you're going for a frying pan, which is PFAS free. Just build awareness and say, what can I do as a user to reduce my PFAS footprint as either a company or as a private consumer? So a summary. Thousands of fabrics, thousands of chemicals are under this PFAS umbrella. It's difficult to regulate, difficult to identify. Some are less dangerous, some are more dangerous. It's very difficult. The regulators struggle with that. You find PFAS in most everywhere in real life. You know, you wear a coat which is water resistant, it's a repellent. There's a chance that it's PFAS containing. All of this. Yeah, it's very useful. As I said, it's not just all bad. It's actually all great when it comes to PFAS. It's really, really, really important product for many, many applications. But it causes problems, and that's why the industry has to find alternatives. And the industry sometimes is profit-driven organizations, and if I'm working for, let's say, company ABC in the US, and I'm a guy said I invented a product which is PFAS free, and the CEO says my shareholders are interested in profit, and how much more do we sell? How much more profit do we make? And at that moment, the developer or the producer or the employees says, no, sorry, there is no immediate profit there, but that's a future product. And I said, no, we are not investing in future, we're investing in current sales. I tell you, I've experienced that in lots of listed companies who are very short term when it comes to they call it the shareholder investment, shareholder profit. That's their goal, not really much the prime product. So it has to be driven by the consumers. So those kinds of webinars build awareness to everybody. So that if you're an HPLC lab, you should ask for an HPF PFAS-free cap, because this makes a little impact into the production of less PFAS in the market. Or, as I said, raincoat or something like that. If you ask yourself, how can I reduce my PFAS footprint? After this webinar, we already did a good job.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining our webinar. And if you still have any questions, please feel free to. You can send me an email. My details are in the Q&A section. Then I will gladly forward it to Florian. Thank you very much.
No, thank you to everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.